Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another daily vlog. Just washed my dog's Woody's little bed. I'm just gonna need to put all of the pillows into this little thingy. And I thought this would be a time because this is basically one of his homes. He has a couple of beds and obviously he is also sometimes sitting on the couch with us. Sometimes, most of the times, we kind of have to fight him sometimes for the space on the couch, and he's sometimes quite unhappy if I get his space. It's obviously my space, but in his mind it is his space on the couch, and he has to sit in the middle. But this is his bed, and I just washed it. And because this is his, in air quotes, home, I kind of wanted to talk about burnout and my experiences in the past when I was a little bit younger. It was like about 20 years ago or something, when I was in my mid-20s. So my parents, or my family in general, we weren't that... What's the in-between word between wealthy and poor? So we were in the middle of, or my dad was the one who was providing money. He was the one who was working. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was taking care of my brother and I. And my dad was working in the company, but then suddenly was laid off because the whole company was shut down. So that was the reason why we were always like in the middle, but then kind of dropped into the more of the poorer side of the of society, basically. And at some point, my dad was not able to, so this is a very shortened down version, because first he lost his job and money wasn't great, so I moved out of our home. So I started living in the city, but with a roommate. So I just rented a room in an apartment, kind of, what is it called in English? In Germany, it's called Wohngemeinschaft, WG. So yeah, when you just rent a room with a couple of people. And I started working, and basically I wanted to provide A, for myself, and B, obviously didn't want to be like a burden, financially speaking, to my dad. And it was just easier because we lived in the suburbs and I always had to drive to the city for work. So I moved to the city. And yeah, so my parents and I, we've never been like on the richer side or on the wealthy side, but rather on the poorer side. And then, unfortunately, my dad was not able to pay the mortgage on the house I grew up in and they were living in. So the bank had to, I'm not sure if that's the right word, foreclose it. So the bank was giving away our house for auctioning, and that was terrible. Especially also, I remember being there one day, and someone just rang at the door and was like, "Oh, we've read that this house is pretty soon for auction. Can we just come in and take a look?" And I was really angry. I don't know what age I was, but I was mad at that. I just closed the door on them. So yeah, he was not able to pay the mortgage. We lost the house, sold it at a huge, well, not we, my dad sold it at a huge loss. They moved into a smaller apartment, rent apartment. So my dad, my mom, my brother, and I was still living in Hamburg. And that was the beginning, and I feel like the beginning of me stressing out and slowly building up burnout. Did I say that I wanted to talk about burnout? I forgot. But this this video is all about this burnout. 2 burnouts actually. So that was the reason how my burnout slowly built up. Because in my mind, I was stressing out about my family and about money. And I started working even harder. I had 2 jobs, one main job and one job on the side. The main job was where I started working in the film industry, and I loved that job. But I was also doing photography on the side because that was something I was really passionate about. I was doing a couple of side jobs. And I was working so much to earn money for myself, but also to, I remember I also gave my mom a little bit money because that was also the time when my parents separated or started to separate. So there was a lot going on where I was working not only to earn money, to help my family, but also because I did not want to end up like my dad. And this sounds a little bit terrible to say it like that, but I love my dad, and now I look up to him because he was able to kind of get through all of that. And he taught me so many valuable lessons. But back then, I didn't see it that way. Back then, I was a little bit angry at my dad. I was frustrated by his decisions of choosing the plural of path of his life that ended up making really terrible financial decisions that impacted the family. And truth be told, it wasn't that he made a bad decision, but he is a very trusting person. He made a couple of business agreements with other people, but not in writing. He's so trusting. He always made it with a handshake. He was always trusting those people. And arguably, it wasn't a bad, he didn't make bad business decision, but he made bad, like, human decision. He wasn't very street smart. So he always got ripped off, which led to him putting the family into a very bad position. And again, nowadays I can see it more clearly, and I see all of the positives that he has are ingrained in me. I have so many good positive attributes that I got from my parents. But I didn't see it that way, and I worked really hard to not get into that position, which made me now the person that I am. So I have all of the positive attributes of my dad and my mom, but I was able to kind of work on all of the negative things that they have within their character, within what decisions they made. And I was able to kind of not ingrain that in me. And I was able to make it better. But back then I was really angry at my dad and at my parents. I actually didn't talk to them for 2 years because of all of that, because there was another thing, and that is why I'm saying my dad is too trustworthy. He made a deal with someone, and that person ripped him off so badly that I was put into the position to get a loan and give a lot of money to my parents, and I had to work off that loan for many years. And honestly, back then, again, I was mad at him. I'm not mad at him anymore because I understand the position, and he said sorry. But all of that together, the position that my family was in, that one situation where I had to take up a really big loan in my 20s and work that off, and my thought process of I have to work and work and work and work because I do not want to get in that position that my parents were in, made me grind so much that I got a burnout. Unfortunately, the first burnout, I didn't take it seriously. I told myself, okay, I just can't take off a week off for vacation. Let's take a week off for vacation, just re-energize, and then just go back to work. Stupid decision. It was the worst decision I could ever have made, because after that 1 or 2 weeks of vacation, I went back to worked only, I would say, 2 or 3 days, and I crashed so hard. I had this noise in my ear. I was not able to kind of memorize stuff, and I literally broke down. So I took a hiatus. I went to a therapist, and although that therapist was terrible, now having experienced multiple different therapists, I just know. Back then I also already know that she was terrible, but now I even more know that she was really terrible. I had, I think, weekly sessions, and every time I sat there, she was the typical kind of therapist that, now that I'm kind of reflecting it, she was in this office so in Hamburg we have a lake in the middle, and there are multiple areas when you live or when you have an office or a home right on that lake. You're obviously paying a lot of rent, or you are very wealthy that you own that place. And she had an office right next to that lake. And she had a beautiful apartment, and inside that apartment was her office. And she was, in my mind, the typical person who just did it for the money. And basically, whenever I sat there, I really had the feeling she wasn't interested in anything what I was saying. And basically, it felt like she didn't listen. And yeah, it wasn't great experience. Nevertheless, it did help. It did help, and obviously I was able to work through the burnout, and I grew from that experience, but it wasn't great. And long story short is, it is very easy to get to a point where you just grind a lot, and all of this grind gets you into the position where there is the risk that you get into a burnout. As I said, for me it was like I was working because I had financial pressure of that loan that I had to make, because I told myself I don't want to get into a position where my parents were. I need to be financially stable. I don't want to be rich. For me, it never was about getting rich. I always said, and I'm still saying, I want to be able to pay my rent, and I want to be able, if I am in a rut, not in a rut financial, but for example, if I'm at some place and I say I don't drink any alcohol anymore, but for example, if I say like, oh, okay, we drove here by car, but I want to drink whiskey sour or whatever. I want to be in a financial position that I can say, okay, it's no problem to take a cab, because cabs in Germany are really expensive. I can take a cab to home without worrying that my bank account is completely in minus, you know? That was always what I was saying. And when you work that much because you are in a position where you're kind of stressed out, where you have so many responsibilities, it is very easy to get into a grind. And when you are in a grind, when you're working not because you enjoy it, but more because you have so many responsibilities and you kind of start to stress out, it is very likely to burn out. And especially here with YouTube, you also see it, that so many people rely on this YouTube thing, which started out as something that you enjoy, and then suddenly it becomes something that is a grind because you made it maybe potentially your main job and you're stressing out, or because you do it so repeatedly and it has started to become a grind that you kind of burn out and you just don't want to do it. And so for me, I don't know, I don't really have a big takeaway here, but my recommendation is, and that was something that I was doing already back then, I had this passion project of photography. And I know I'm in a very fortunate position that I'm doing a job that I really love, but back then I loved both of my jobs, being in the film industry and doing the photography, videography on the side, but I still burned out. So it is very important that you have something where you can kind of switch off that grind. So you have something, and that's probably also maybe something what I'm trying to say here is have something on the side what you're passionate about and be very protective of that is something that you enjoy and doesn't necessarily become a grind, you know. For me, it always has been this YouTube project. I mean, I love my job as a film editor, but if I would not be a film editor, I still would be doing a YouTube channel because that is something that I really enjoy and where I have like a secondary passion creative outlet. And I'm saying now you need to protect that because I noticed over the last few months that my main channel has become a grind because I was looking at the numbers. As I always mentioned in the last few vlogs, this legal process where the client didn't pay me has put a huge hole in my savings, which then again can kind of spark that idea, oh, I have to earn money with my second YouTube channel and I need to be very careful about that. I do not want that main channel just because I want it to be a secondary means of income. I don't want that to become a grind. And also, excuse me, talked so much and didn't drink any water. Where was I? Oh, yeah. And also not being shy of going to therapy. I went back to therapy, do that on a regular basis. It's just like going to the dentist, right? You have to, even if you have no issues with your teeth, you have to go to the dentist on a regular basis just to check up, just to see if everything is okay, maybe to clean them. And that's just the same thing with your mental health. You need to sometimes talk to someone, and it's really important that you kind of realize when going to therapy, it's not necessarily only about talking something that you maybe have an issue with, but for me, therapy is a good place to talk to someone who is objective. Talking to friends, people say like, oh, you can talk to friends about your problems. Talking with friends about your problems, and that's something that I noticed back then. I grew up with, not all of them, but a lot of friends of mine came from not a wealthy, but from a place where they were pretty much secure. For example, their grandparents passed away and everything they inherited already went to like a savings account. So they were always somewhat safe financially speaking. Their parents sometimes were divorced, sometimes they weren't, but all of them were very stable in terms of financial. And whenever I talked about my problems with them, yes, they listened and yes, they tried to help. But I felt even more alone, and sometimes, although they didn't judge me, I felt a little bit awkward. I felt not judged, but I felt weird to kind of admit to some of my friends that my parents failed financially speaking and we were in so much troubles. And I feel not great talking to my friends about my issues. But although that therapist was terrible, it still felt good talking to someone who had no idea about me and was looking at it from an objective perspective. And that really felt great and still is great, because when I'm talking to a therapist, I know that person A, looks at my issues objectively and is educated enough to deal with that professionally. Friends sometimes or people around you either judge you or have very terrible unsolicited advice. You don't want that. It's not helpful. So it's a good idea to find a therapist. And I know in Germany it is very difficult to find a therapist, which is basically why I'm paying for one. So you can use your insurance to get a therapist in Germany, and your insurance pays for that. But those therapists are very difficult to get because all of them are booked out. So I got one that I'm paying out of my pocket. Yes, it's expensive. I pay 75 euros per hour. But for me, it's worth it to do it once per month. It's just better for me. And I know many people cannot afford that. And at the position I'm in at the moment with that legal thing, honestly, I cannot afford it either. And as I've previously mentioned in my daily vlog about mental health, I came to the realization that that is a stupid thought. Yes, I cannot afford it, but I should afford it because my mental health is much more important than those 75 euros in my pocket. Obviously, I'm not going to bankrupt myself with that. I obviously am careful not to do that, but I think that is money worth spending. And wow, that was 22 minutes. To break it down, that was my story about me burning out. To summarize, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, try to recognize and realize when you potentially get into a grind. Try to find stuff where you have something where you are very passionate about, and that could potentially get your mind off the grind. And it is important to not only grind, but also having something that you're passionate about that can help you to re-energize. And also think about, if you feel like you're getting into a grind, think about the potential of going, or the possibility of going to therapy. It's a good thing, especially to prevent burning out, because once you burned out, it will be very hard to recover. And especially once you burn out, you will not be able to work, and you will not be able to earn money that you need to provide for your family. So think about that maybe. All right, that was my not so short vlog. Maybe check out the one about mental health in this video up here. And YouTube thinks that you like the video on here. And don't forget to subscribe by clicking the button up here. I see you tomorrow.